Welcome to the Everlasting Podcast, the ultimate destination for CEOs, founders, and changemakers like you, who are not only satisfied with success, but striving to create everlasting fulfillment. I'm your host, Nico van der Venne, entrepreneur and fervent believer in the power of everlasting fulfillment. Do you find yourself pondering what's beyond success? Have you ever thought about everlasting fulfillment? If so, you're in the right place. Here, we don't just talk about business, we talk about the journey from success to fulfillment. We'll engage in insightful conversations with distinguished CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs, and experts in various fields each week. We'll uncover the secrets to creating a sustainable business, transcending societal norms, and building everlasting fulfillment. So if you're ready to go beyond profits and accolades to create everlasting fulfillment in life and business, stick around, because the Everlasting Podcast is the strategic insight you've been waiting for.
Hi, Nico. How are you today?
Hey, Sam. I'm doing fine. Thank you very much for asking.
That's fantastic. Wonderful. So it was so fantastic being on your podcast, Everlasting. And would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners here on LinkedIn Live?
I'd be glad to. Thank you very much for asking. So my name is Nico van der Venne. I'm located in Belgium, and I am a confidant to starting and seasoned successful CEOs and founders who are actually striving to achieve everlasting fulfillment. That's the short story right there. Father of two, married 15 years. So if you need to know my shoe size, I can give that as well, but I don't think that's that interesting.
Yeah. So that's lovely, Nico. I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Samantha Amit. I work with leaders predominantly in tech, a lot of managers with teams, cross-cultural, global teams in different countries, and also with business owners that are developing teams and scaling. And that's a little bit about me. Mindfulness coach, mindfulness practitioner, leadership coach. I've been coaching for 16 years now. And as you can hear from the accent, South African. I live in Israel, married an Israeli, and we have 3 beautiful kids. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So you're talking about 16 years of experience in coaching. And then you're mentioning mindfulness. I've always been intrigued because we've had this discussion on the podcast for a little bit, but in 16 years, you probably had some very, very unique discussions and probably learned to adapt with some specific tools that you use, and the people that you meet are very versatile and very different probably. So I'm just intrigued because we had this conversation, like I said, but I think it's very interesting for people to know where you come from and what story that you bring, because I think that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for asking. So I want to actually tie my story also into the topic today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
of being overwhelmed and, all this busyness, because it's a little bit like an epidemic today that we all are busy. Or I shouldn't say all, but most of us are. And a lot of our self-worth comes from how busy we can be. And I definitely was like that, as a young female climbing up the corporate ladder. And I got myself very overwhelmed from, trying to move from achievement to achievement. All those years back, starting off in high tech, in different leadership roles. I was a development manager. Believe it or not, I'm originally a programmer. You wouldn't think so. Now, coach. My first degree was in those days, it was COBOL, and we had at university these huge screens with huge servers, and then went into developing C++. And anyway, in high tech, I got myself very overwhelmed with trying to move up the corporate ladder and moving from achievement to achievement. And I actually loved it, but I couldn't really enjoy my career because I was always like running, busy, trying to get to the next role, the next position, the next deliverable, winning the next project, fighting from crisis to crisis. And so when I came to mindfulness, it was like my savior, because having one kid, we started off with one kid, of course. And the second kid came along.
That could be different. Yeah, there could be 2 or 3. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. But when the second kid came along, I'd suffered from not only like being busy at work and suffering from, overwhelm from time to time, but I also suffered from anger, from probably also, like if we go back, we could find traces, but I suffered from anger. And so when that anger started coming out at my kids, obviously it doesn't start with anger, it starts with annoyance and frustration. And so mindfulness was for me a path to becoming calmer, to actually, for me, it was a path to fulfillment, everlasting fulfillment. That was my path. Because I hated myself, especially as a mom. On the outside, I looked very like I had everything, I was doing well career-wise, had, a husband, 2 beautiful young kids. But within me, I felt like I was eating myself up. I wasn't fulfilled because I couldn't really even enjoy what I was doing, because I was always like worried about getting everything right and moving, as I say. So, so it came from a very big need within me. And I would even say pain, like a pain and suffering within. Yeah. What about you? What about you, Nico?
It's amazing. It's amazing because I kind of can step a little bit into your shoes, except for being pregnant and having children. That's not the part that I the different dynamic. But no, I do understand where you come from, because I used to work in IT for 15 years. I'm not putting in the IT trend as being the stressful environment that this should show, but I do know what you mean, because I came from I have a background within electromechanics. So I did high school and I stopped school. I didn't go to university. I didn't go. It was just a financial thing, and at home it was something that was not done. You either studied really hard and you were really good at studying, because my brother is, for instance, is 8 years older than I am, and he's highly educated, etc., etc. And so he took his opportunities, and I kind of stepped behind on that story where I just learned to be an electrician. Do not ask me to come to your house and do electricity, because I think half of the house burned down. But anyway, it's been so long. But I digress. So in the career that I had, I always stepped into other jobs. So I was always searching for the next big thing. I saw it was around the year 2000. I think I had my high school finished in 97, and then the year 2000 was really close by. So computers and all of that stuff was wonderful. So I wanted to jump into that story. And I came from a cabling. I'd actually pull cables into, these gutters and everything that you see in supermarkets and whatever. So I was very good at that. And I had a natural tendency to be the leader of these environments. So people kind of came to me for advice on how they were going to approach and this and that, how we plan and so on. So it was kind of natural for me to do these things. But because I wasn't trained in these things, I usually came to a point where I was like, wow, these people are asking me. At that time, I was like a 22, 23-year-old little kid who was handling these guys who were like 40 and 50 years old. And certain conflicts arise. And in those conflicts, you feel overwhelmed and you don't feel worthy of that leadership role. Even though people just flocked around you and asked the questions, you're sitting there and saying, why are they asking me? This guy is a lot more experienced. And after all, a couple of years, I just skipped to another job, and I actually got bored very quickly in jobs. And that it's kind of strange because a lot of people would say you have ideal positions. I had very good pay, I had a very wonderful job and everything, but I got bored. And if I got bored, I skipped to another job. So just to give you guys an idea, I had 14 different jobs. So I just skipped from one thing to another. And it does also have a big advantage. I have a lot of experience in so many different sectors. So I also experienced that overwhelm and those conflicts and those uneasy feelings in all those different sectors. And then at some point in 2019, I'll skip the whole part. I ended up having a depression at some point, which was more related to a private relationship than to a job related. You know, everything piles up, of course, but I had a very deep depression at that time, which I found Jim Carrey has a wonderful way of explaining what depression really is. It's taking off a mask, you know, it's taking off that facade and really becoming the true you. And that's where I understand as well what you're saying with mindfulness. At that point in time, I also got in touch with what mindfulness meant and could be, and meditation and all that wonderful stuff that can aid you as a leader. And because of doing that, I felt a lot more confident, but it ended up being confident and not worthy. You know, there's a very big difference between those two. And I'm actually happy. I'll show the book later on in our conversation, but I'm happy I actually found a book that explains it quite well. And it's a really recent book, so I'll show that later. But to finish off my story, I came to a point where I was with IBM, and I was the senior project manager for complex environments. So I only had the really complex things that came to me, which meant that a lot of people asked me the questions to solve how to, you know, how to fix everything and so on. And at some point, you know a lot of answers, but the point where you start not knowing the answers, it gets very confrontational and very isolating. And that's one of the things that I've noticed, that um, why people become overwhelmed is because they do not talk about it anymore. They start to isolate themselves and do not speak to either a manager, you know, an N+1 as we say, or a colleague anymore, because they'll show their vulnerability. And I find it in the recent times, and I don't know how you see that, Sam, but I see that a lot of more people are showing those vulnerabilities, and it's actually boosting business instead of, you know, what used to be cutting people down because they showed their vulnerabilities. So that's a bit of my story where I ended up, and then I started a business, and that's, well, the crazy time just came after that, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But I found the vulnerability is something that was pretty key in solving, for me, solving that overwhelm and insecurities and unworthiness.
We have a question from Dorit. She asks, may I ask if either of you believe this may have been related to ADHD? I'm not sure if she's referring to your story of changing jobs so many times. I know I can speak for myself that for sure ADHD, more ADD in my case. And, you know, we know that jumping around and, you know, overwhelm, impulsiveness, a lack for the new is often very related to that. Would you like to comment? Can you see that?
Yeah, I saw. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I see the comments now. Cool. Well, in my experience, I've never had any tests done for any of those wonderful acronyms that so many people talk about. I do know in the experience that I've had in all these years, and in my coaching trainings and in other trainings, leadership trainings, I've noticed these tendencies within me as being a property of who I am. And I would say that people in my family probably might have given me one of those acronyms, but I myself have never been confirmed. But I do know that I have eye sensitivity. That's something that I do know. That's something that somebody told me explicitly, which means that I take up a vibe of a room really, really heavily if I don't shelter myself, for instance, or if I am tired, I have a lot of issues with sounds and stuff like that, which makes me nervous, which makes me jumpy, which makes me etc. etc. Now, on the other hand, jumping from job to job, getting bored, I think it's very, almost scripted ADHD, or one of those beautiful things. And I found what I've learned, especially, is that those acronyms, as they have been used now, I found that those are actually tools for the win. They are not something that should bring you down, or that you should have doubts with yourself or anything like that. You are who you are. And that's one thing that I've learned very much, to accept the fact that I can be bored really quickly, or I think too fast, or a lot of people do not, that I have currently, just to be more specific, I currently am in a position where I have about 15 people that work together with me. That's my team. And I think too fast sometimes for them. I really have to, hit the brakes at some point, because I'm already thinking on strategy number 15 on what we need to do in the next three phases. And they're still building on the first phase. And it has its advantages and also its disadvantages. But as you know that this is the situation, you can work with that. And you start documenting these things. And then okay, our conversation is going in that direction. Are you okay with that? And when they say no, very open-spirited, then you can say, okay, let's wait with it. We have to take time to fix the first thing. And I think that's also something that can aid you in being a good professional, in being a good leader. I work with a lot of CEOs and founders, and they also have issues where they are strategically looking forward, and they're already building a company that doesn't exist yet. But they know that they need to, follow the rhythm of the company, of their team, of their board, of course, but also those different facets. So yes, I think I can answer with a confirmed yes on that question. But I think the context needs to be there, that it is an added value and not something that should hold you back.
Mm-hmm. I feel like we've been talking about a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe for the listeners, what we can do is start also to shift a little bit into tools.
Yeah.
And so I have a few things I want to say from what I'm just going to pull out a few things from what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned about complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to say that overwhelm comes up a lot because of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
There's the world that we work in today and that we live in is highly complex.
Mm-hmm.
And so just that alone creates a lot of busyness. It creates a lot of overwhelm. And so we need to navigate that with ways and find tools to gain clarity, and to feel almost comfortable, as you said, acceptance, you named that, acceptance. And to find ways to create clarity. Because for me, clarity within the complexities, like let's say you're driving and there's a lot of fog.
Yeah.
You can't see, so you're going to have to slow down dramatically. So we are navigating in a lot of fog in our work landscapes during the day, because the fog's coming from complex environments, but it's also coming from the fact that humans today have all these different makeups. So some people, oopsie, I've got something flying around here. Some people may be suffering from depression that you don't even know that you're working with. Some people are on the bridge of burnout. Some people may just be triggered and highly sensitive and triggered. Some people may be fast thinkers, and so you've lost them, as you said, because, And so a big part of, I think, what we need to do is, first of all, pause and get to know the people we're working with and what their needs are.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe it starts with us. It starts with us, and so maybe it's a good idea to navigate into my Mindful Act leadership model.
Oh yeah, I would love to go into that. I think it's a very valuable tool. Yeah, go right ahead. Uh-huh.
So the ACT model is called ACT, the acronym, because you need to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And first of all, I want to congratulate everybody that's listening now, maybe watching us, because that's an act in itself. Even if you may be multitasking, which we often do today, you've showed up, and it says that you want to gain tools to be more confident as a leader. And for me, anybody is a leader that wants to be intentional and wants to create an impact within their teams, within their company, within society, within the world. We all have the ability to be a leader, and so we can be an individual contributor. We don't need to have a team behind us, but it does mean using the ACT model. So ACT stands for achieve, which is all about me and myself. And how can I look after my energy? So I'm going to give an example of Mandy, who I coached, who happens to have 3 teams. She's an ex-Googler, works for a very big high-tech company now. And basically, they threw her into the deep end because when she first came, she was already responsible for 2 teams. One of them was a problematic team. And so she needed to navigate this complex environment. And she was a naturally stressed person, which if people didn't get this, I'm naturally stressed. That's why I love mindfulness, because it helps calm me, and it, as I said, it makes me sane, and it makes me able to be in the moment and actually calm myself down and also live and be awake. So Mandy, when she started coaching with me, she worked on the A part of the achieve, which is all about me and myself. And we used mindfulness for her to be more aware of what was going on with her emotions, with her mental state, with her sensations in the body. Because mindfulness, when you practice it, mindfulness is basically being present. But being present in the moment to what? Okay? Because a murderer can also be present. But if you're present with good intentions, then you can be present, first of all, to your thoughts, to your feelings, and to your sensations in the body. And this is like a radical tool. And a lot of people are already practicing this. They don't even realize it, but they're practicing it. For example, yoga is a mindful movement practice. Anybody who plays music is practicing informal mindfulness, because you really need to focus when you're playing, and you get totally immersed and present to the music. So it's a focus on something. So when you practice mindfulness, or you practice also a kind of meditation, there's usually always a focus point. Mindfulness, by the way, is one kind of meditation practice. So I'm going to go back to the acronym ACT. So Mandy started working on herself, and she started noticing her thinking and how, when she had deadlines coming up, how she would get stressed. And not only that, she would get stressed from her team. So if her team was stressed, she would get stressed. So first of all, the first step is just noticing. And once you notice, there are many, many ways that you can actually attend to yourself. Doesn't mean essentially calming yourself down, but it may be building confidence. It may mean getting clarity. So let's say I have a deadline. Mandy had a deadline, and she would say, okay, what can I do about this now? What do I need to do? So attending to her thinking, attending to her emotions, attending to what's going on in her body. And when she progressed with that, then there's also the connect part. That's the C of the ACT model. And the C is all about one-on-one connections. It's about you working with your team or in conversation, which, I mustn't forget, because I told you I do have ADD. I have a free mini course that I want to invite people. I'll put that in the comments. I have a free mini course on how you can practice mindfulness during your day to reduce overwhelm, to reduce all this busyness. And so maybe if we have time, I'll speak about that. So she started practicing actually what's in this mini course, which is 3 minutes a day. That's all she did. She practiced 3 minutes a day. And then what happened is she started realizing that she was becoming more and more confident, not only on the outside, but isn't it amazing when you feel confident on the inside? You know the difference.
Yes, there's a big difference between those two.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it starts from within, it's a lot more powerful. Absolutely. Yeah.
So the shift, that it was a radical shift that happened to her. She was transformed, because what happened to her, not only was she starting to attend to herself and lowering her own level of stress and becoming, more clear and more sure around what she wanted to do. But what she was able to do is, when her team leader came to her with the same fears of missing a deadline because something shifted, there are many moving parts. And it's not all about us and what's in our control. When you're working cross teams, then there are many moving parts. And so many things can basically go off track.
Absolutely.
And so when she had a team leader coming to her, which is the connect part, she was able to practice mindfulness in the moment, which part of it is already breathing. We spoke about that on your podcast, right? So anybody that's like listening to us now, just, come back to your breath. Just breathe as you're listening to us, because the breath activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your calming system. And when you do that, it's already going to increase, it's going to start calming your body down. So she was able to practice 3 minutes a day, or even when she was with one of her team leaders. And so she was able not only to become more confident in the moment of how she was aligning with him. You spoke about aligning. She was also able to calm him down and be there for him and show up. And so he started believing in himself more, and he became more confident. And then he could go with his team and then align with them, because, sorry to say, but stuff happens.
Absolutely.
And so part of us navigating that is how we adapt and how we are resilient to the changes that come our way, the complexity, etc. Yeah. And so the tea, maybe I'll save for a little bit later. I'm gonna pause a moment, take a few breaths, and let you come into the conversation.
It's astonishing that some of these things that you've mentioned are indeed some things that I do as a second nature over the years, because getting yourself into the moment of the conversation. I remember just recently today, I had a conversation with two of my team members who are pretty key in the success formula of my team. We discovered an issue with one of the systems, and they were really digging into what the problem is and how we need to solve it, and this and this and this and that. And at some point, I listen in, so I become very silent. Silence is a very, very powerful tool in stressful situations. Then you have things flying around. I have an itchy nose. There you go. So one of the things that I've learned in crisis moments, so like I said, I've been in complex environments. Crisis moments are the moments where I become silent and I listen to what is going on. And you hear a lot of emotion. You hear emotion. You do not see emotion. You hear emotion. And then
feel it. And you feel it.
Especially, yeah. I try to close down at those points to not feel it too much, because I might, like you say, jump into the stress of the team. and then you go into that flow, and then you're end up somewhere you don't want to be. But I go into that silence, and that's where I listen to what is being said and start to analyze what is being done and what is not being done, especially the questions that are not being asked. I've learned to ask so many questions in life instead of giving answers, because that's one of the major things that my team kind of gets annoyed with that. But I only ask questions until they say, okay, stop asking questions and help us. So I try to help them, find the solution themselves. So in that point, coming back to it, what I do is I ask the question, how much are we talking about? Give me specific numbers. And why do I do that? It's because of changing their mind from emotion to rationality, to really going to the rational. And then they design a very specific number. It changes your, it's the left side that's creative and the right side, I always mixed up the two, but you switch from your brain side, and then you start to move away from emotion. You start going into the more rational design, and then you start looking at solution thinking at that point in time. So you become very aware again of what is going on. And because I'm aware, I ask the questions. They also go into that flow of saying, are we actually doing something that is necessary? Question that. Do we really need to solve this problem? In the end, we actually solved it pretty quickly by becoming very rational and listing up the solutions. And when you're saying about connection, that's where the connection kind of comes in. You listen to your team, you become silent as a leader, or as a person, even with your own kids. If they're shutting around, they're running from here to there. If you become relaxed, and I know it's not easy. I have 2 boys and they're both very active, so I know it's not easy. But if you become relaxed and start asking yourself, okay, I heard a saying this week, which I found so beautiful. As parents, we are here to bring the core memories to our children, and we become the ghosts of our children's future. And I'm like, what if I am the person here sitting, my kids are doing whatever, I would become angry and think of, what would I be doing if I was an 80-year-old man and see my children? I would be happy. I would be calm. I would tell them with a reasonable voice and not an angry voice and stuff like that. Those are amazing techniques to use to start using that connection. So yeah. And the strange and the funny thing is what you were saying about self-awareness, self-worth, the click, as we say, the switch that turns on at the moment that you become you get to the point where you become self-worthy, realizing your self-worthiness, not yourself, being self-confident, which is, I find, and I've learned again that self-worthiness is the multiplier of self-confidence. And you go into your self-worthiness and you sit there and you say, I am worthy to tell these people or ask these people these questions. As a leader, I am allowed to do this. And you don't go into that stress, and then you connect. There's a lot more connection there, because self-worthiness is a lot bigger in energy than anything else that exists. So yeah, I see that we have another question come in, and I want to
while you're reading that and thinking what you want to reply to, I just want to name a couple of things that you spoke about for everybody here, because questioning is radical. Questioning is transformational because it's an energy that opens up. And a lot of times I see emerging leaders think that they have to speak up and give the answers, but the wisdom actually comes from asking questions. I think the wise one asks questions, whether you have a team or not, and it opens up the whole conversation. So you spoke about silence before. I think silence is something that's learned, and it's not easy for a lot of people to to acquire that skill to get silent. I can tell you about Brian, who asked a question and then his engineers didn't answer. And so that led to him being frustrated and being annoyed. And then he came back into the coaching session and I said to him, Brian, how about asking the question and then, waiting, or asking the question and letting them know, listen, I'm asking questions now. I'd really like your input. Let's, share together, and I'm going to wait. So I aligned with them. Aligning. Sometimes it's helpful also if you experiment with new things as a leader. It doesn't matter, again, whether you have a team or you're in a meeting. It's helpful to let people know and align with them that you're trying a new strategy. So I'm going to try the silence, that they don't think you've gone like cuckoo or something like that. So that helps a lot. And then
give them the box where you're working in. Clarify the box you're working in. Absolutely.
Yeah. So ask questions that are not yes, no questions. That actually builds confidence in the room. It creates inclusivity. When there's overwhelm because of complexity, then often it can be remarkable how the wisdom of the crowds, when you're sitting, and it could be a brainstorming session, it could be just, informally having a conversation if you are in the office in person, and if not, then, which made me think of something else that I'm going to talk about, but 1 second. That's my mind racing ahead. But another thing that you named that is also a tool that I think is important, that I call it zooming out, and you zoomed out into the distance of being age 80 and thinking, how would I be as a parent if I had that wisdom? So it often helps to adopt, like if you've got a resonant leader and you're feeling somewhat, something's taxing you, you're feeling like doubtful, you have self-doubt, you come, you take a few breaths and you think, okay, what would so-and-so think, and that can help give you clarity. It can help also, again, asking questions, what would my future self do? If I was leading in another 5 years' time, would I sweat this? Would this get to me? Or, how would I be in 5 years' time? And then you can sometimes realize that what we're getting upset or annoyed or irritated or frustrated over is something that is sometimes so trivial. And so that's zooming out to what would my future self do or think or be, or could be helpful. So I'm going to pause here. Would you like to respond to Richard? Maybe just read out part of it, what you understand.
So Richard says, I'm curious for your reflection on how you handle people's expectation for leadership or input in a time when it's important to be silent, listening, outwardly present. I'm not 100% sure if I if I understand the question, because to me it's a very long question which has different facets. But if I look at how do you handle people's expectation for leadership, I'll stop there. In essence, where the team that I'm working with now, I've been working for 2 years with them, and my way of working was a culture shock within the environment. I am very open towards my team with asking my questions. From the day one, I actually told them that I will not be there to hold their hand and solve problems. I will be there to support them in solving problems by asking questions. And if they want me to, they can tell me to help without questions. And they've done that very, very, very often. And even then, I challenge them a little bit of, okay, is this actually the point where you want to ask me, to jump into the next level or whatever in problem solving? And what I've found is that they started asking the questions before they come to me. So they don't always come to me straight away. They ask themselves the questions first, and then they come to me, which gives me the opportunity to go deeper straight off instead of, going into problem solving and so on and so on at a low or at a high level. I don't have to jump into the helicopter. We actually go into the details. We're looking at the ants on the ground here, and then I can know exactly what they want to do. I see Richard wanted to describe that. People might expect a leader to be directive. How do you keep them feeling confident in you when you're trying to gather information, stay calm, be aware of your thoughts and feelings, etc.? It's a work in progress, I must say. It's not something that you do from day one to day two. Like I said, the first clear message I made was, I will ask you questions before I solve problems. I'm also one that takes decisions, and I understand risk. And I support my people in every aspect of their job. Even if they make mistakes, I take responsibility. And they did not know that before. Leaders were looking for the one person who put that one letter wrong, and they were looking at the details and saying, you did this and this and that. I talked to people and I asked them, okay, what happened? Tell me what happened so I know what I'm responsible for. So I really create a trust environment. That's exactly what I do with the CEOs and the founders as well, because I go into very deep conversations from day one. And it's necessary to create a very safe environment. And one of those things is asking questions. Don't go and solve their problems. If they run into the wall, be there to catch them. And what I do have to say with that, when you come down to being directive, they get two opportunities for me. So they can make two mistakes in the same thing, and then I will be directive. Then I will be clearly saying, okay, now you've done it twice, we've solved it twice. The third time, you're taking full responsibility. And of course, that gives them a completely different environment. And I have not seen anybody do a mistake twice. It is something that you grow with your team. Of course, it doesn't work with everybody. Yeah? There are people who are in their ways and they stay in their ways. And that's one thing that's wonderful when you come back to the ACT model, like you say, Sam, is that you come very much aware with who are you in that meeting. And who are the people that are there? Are those the people that are easy to ask questions to, or are those the people who do not want to hear any questions? They want to have solutions. Then you have to, change your strategy a little bit, but mostly support them, and take responsibility for your team. If you're a leader, you're in the front of the horses, you're not on the carriage. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I like to work a lot with polarities. So I'd like to add, be supportive and be challenging. Like, you were really clear and you could hear the challenge in and your direct, style. And so I think it's really important to be supportive and be directive and be clear. We all need to understand what our strengths are and what our areas of development are. That's the achieve part of the ACT model. And the connect part is understanding who your team is, who the people are maybe that you're working with. Maybe it's not a team, maybe it's internal stakeholders, maybe it's external stakeholders. It helps when we're more aware of our own thoughts and feelings, which again, I'm going to remind you, this 5-day mini course, which is 3 minutes a day. You practice actually touching base after meetings. Part of what you do in this mini course is journaling around your thoughts and feelings. And so you become aware in the moment what's going on. And the more you become aware of yourself, you start becoming aware of others as well. And so it's really important, as I say again, to understand where your area is of growth. And the more we grow, the more confident we've become. The more we grow and learn, that opens up the more we actually build trust in ourselves, and then we build trust also in our team and the people we're working with. And that's a beautiful thing. So can I just say something about the T model, and then we'll start closing the conversation, the T part of the act. Okay.
Yes, I was kind of at the tip of my chair and go for the tea.
Yeah. Okay. So the tea is not about going and drinking tea. It's about moving from a me mentality, which, by the way, is the place when I'm in the me and I'm in my ego. That's when I'm triggered. That's when I get annoyed. That's when I expect things like I expect my leader to be directive. I expect this. I expect that. And that my ego wants that. But if I zoom out and I let go of that and I move from a me mentality into the we and say, okay, what is the business need? Then I'm actually also doing that approach of zooming out into like a wiser, maybe even older self, and moving into we. What is the business need of us? And so if you've got two teams in conflict, and you're able to grow those teams to look not which team's got the best and how am I going to calm my team member down, but what does the business need of us, then you've really done your job as a leader, because you're growing that confidence and that respect and trust of the people that you're working with, in not only thinking of myself and what I need to do, but actually being able to grow to a higher level of consciousness, which takes time. So thank you all very much. Nico, would you like to add some closing words?
Absolutely. First of all, I will show the book that I mentioned earlier, which is Worthy by Jamie Kern Lima. And I really advise even the male population looking at the video. It is written much female directed, but for the male, just look past the he, which, were, her, whatever story and read the book. There's a very beautiful graph in there. To add some closing words, we're all human beings, and we all live in this little bone thing up here with some gray matter, but we also have a beautiful red thing right here and a belly. I have a big belly, so it kind of helps me. I see these three things as a synchronous brain, which makes us whole. And this is rational, this is emotional, and this is intuition. And as a leader, try to listen to all three of them. I look at them as my personal inner team who tell me what needs to be done. So take the time to be silent, and not only when the SHI whatever hits the fan, but whenever you have time, take silence. And one thing that I have learned from one of my mentors, whom I'm grateful for, is the 4-hour rule, which means that if anything happens, like a conflict or a difficult situation or whatever, and you have the possibility, take 4 hours to think about it, be silent about it, take on other things, but come back to it after 4 hours, and you will be so much clearer, and you will be that strong, standing leader within that team. I am so happy, Sam, that you took the time to do this, and I'm so happy that we did this today. And I'm very happy that the people watching and listening hopefully got some inspiration from our conversation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And anybody who has any further questions, thank you for the questions today. If you have questions, please contact Nico or myself on LinkedIn or any of the other places where we're around. And thank you so much for being with us. And be fulfilled, be joyful, be love. Let's have peace, more peace in the world. And be well. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Everlasting Podcast. Don't forget to follow or subscribe or share this podcast episode with your friends. If it's inspiring to one person, the impact is clear. You want to know more about the everlasting fulfillment? Contact me on LinkedIn or go to my website www.nicovandevenene.com. That is www.nicovandevenne.com. Feel free to pick up your own ebook on the Beyond Success strategy. I hope to see you again next time during our next episode. Have a Beyond Success day.